Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Opposite of Cheating podcast. This is episode 38, and I am Tricia Bertram Gallant, one of the co-authors of The Opposite of Cheating. And I'm thrilled to have with me today, all the way from Egypt, I've got Hoda Mostafa, who is the director of their Center for Teaching and Learning over there. She'll tell you more about, and Maha Bali, who also works in that center and with faculty over at AUC. And I'm so excited to talk with both of them. I have a long-standing relationship with AUC. The last time I was there was 2010, but um, we had a professor from there who was a big part of ICAI back in the day, and in fact was president for a couple of years. So I've worked with folks from AUC off and on over for the last 15 years or so. So excited to have you both. Welcome.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
So we're going to start. Hoda, let's start with you with our normal first question. Like, tell us more about who you are, what you do, in the context in which you do it.
Thank you, Tricia, for inviting us. And Maha and I, we collaborate on a lot of stuff. So there's going to be a lot of overlap between maybe what we talk about. But what I do at our Center for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo, AUC, I'm a professor of practice, and I come from a very different background. My professional training, I was trained as a physician. And I'm was a practicing ophthalmologist for many, many years. And then I moved to education, moved to the Center for Learning and Teaching. So I'm a practice faculty member. I work in educational development, all sorts of things across the institution, and I direct our Center for Learning and Teaching. So I get to work with an amazing team of close to 20 people
Wow.
around all sorts of interesting stuff. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Okay,
And I'm
so
a mom of three boys, which
a
is
mom of three
probably
boys.
more important than everything else that I
And
do.
also Canadian. And Hoda and I just discovered that we both went to, they were both from Guelph. I mean, she's from
Yes.
Guelph. I went to Guelph. And I didn't know this when we were talking pre-recording that her mom went to did her PhD at University of Guelph,
Yep.
right? But your dad was a doctor, a physician
Yes.
in Guelph, and
Physician.
you're now both. So you've actually really just become both your mother and your father.
A
That's so
little bit
cool.
about.
And it's very uncommon for MDs to become directors of
Yeah.
centers for learning and teaching, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering. I've never actually explored that question. How many MDs are directing centers for learning and teaching?
Yeah.
Uh, I know that a lot of people in STEM and the sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, very, very
Sure.
popular. I've seen a lot of people, I've met a lot of colleagues who their background is in STEM, but
Sure.
I haven't met another MD who's directing Center for Learning and Teaching yet. But
Yes.
there's always hope.
I wonder if it's because they always do their own thing. So there's someone over there in the med school doing the Center for Learning and Teaching stuff. They
Yes,
just don't.
medical education. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Hoda. Maha.
And so I am originally a computer scientist, and I had stopped saying this for a really long time because I left a long time ago and started. I've been in the Center for Learning and Teaching for 20 years, and I have a master's in education and a master's and PhD in education. But when AI came back, I was already teaching a course on digital literacies besides my educational development work, and there was AI in it and everything. But ChatGPT came, I'm like, okay, by the way, my undergraduate thesis used AI, and this kind of helps all the mansplainers like sort of stop trying to explain AI to me, which is very
Hmm.
important sometimes.
Hmm.
And so I was a computer scientist. I really didn't like it very much, honestly, as an undergrad. I was an honors, a highest honor student
Yeah.
actually, but I really liked all the liberal arts things that we do.
Mm.
I was at AUC myself as an
Okay. I
undergrad.
was going to ask you that. Yep.
Yeah. So I studied there. And then my last semester, as we were doing the neural network for graduation, I was like, I should study psychology to sort of understand how the brain works. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This is my last semester. I like this stuff more than I like the computer science stuff.
Yeah.
And so I worked for a little bit in the corporate world in Procter and Gamble in their IT department. And one of my mentors is like, you know that you like teaching people and doing trainings and you don't really like the rest of your work. I'm like, yeah, that's true. And so I was doing a lot of NGO work in education. And then
Hmm.
suddenly I'm like, you know what? I've wanted to do education since I was 10 years old. 10 years old, and I'll explain why later if you want.
Mm.
And so I decided to sort of make that shift. And thankfully, the founder of the center we're at right now, Dr. Aziza Lozi, was recruiting someone. And she told someone who told my mom, who knew I was looking for this, and I applied, and I've been there for 20 years, and I just shifted careers completely
Wow.
to
Wow.
this.
So at Maha, if you were going back to do an undergrad now, then would you do like cog sci?
Hmm.
Would
Yeah, so we don't
you,
have that. So, okay, so here's what happened though. I eventually, when I went into doing the PhD in the UK, so the UK approach to education is more sociological than the US one.
yeah.
So because Hood is a doctor, she's always thinking about the neuroscience of learning, and I'm always thinking about the sociology of learning, which is why we
Mhm.
make a great team. We share half a brain, and then the other half is how we complement each other. So I'm very into like social justice and care and the social aspects of
Mhm.
education and the structural issues and the systemic issues, not just how the brain
Okay.
works, but how we work together and how our environment can shape and limit and the hidden curriculum and all those
Yeah.
kinds of things. And that's the kind of thing I blog about, the kind of thing I do research about, the
Mhm.
kind of thing I try. When I'm teaching my students about digital literacies, I teach about intercultural learning. So
Yeah.
if I were to study something else, I would
Mhm.
probably do like a double major, but maybe on more on the sociology side
Okay.
than the neuroscience side.
Yeah. I think if I was to go back to school, I never even knew about cog sci or like back when I went to university. But one of my favorite, I was a psych undergrad, and one of my favorite classes was cognitive psych. So I think I probably would, if I was to go back, probably go with the cog sci. Understanding the brain, it just fascinates me, about how it's the same structure in everybody kind of. I mean, there's differences, but it all just ends up different, like, based on life experiences. So sociology comes into there based, it's just a
Mm.
fascinating that we still haven't figured out, right? Like it's a mystery.
Yeah, I
So
was just watching this show where someone got some kind of brain damage, and the neurologist or the neurosurgeon was saying, it's the brain, so you never know how the recovery is going to be. But you know what the crazy thing, Tricia and Hoda, is? When they taught us neural networks in computer science as undergrads, they were so sure. They were
they
like, this is
protect.
how the brain works. We're
Yeah,
designing AI exactly how the brain works.
yeah,
This is how it works.
yeah.
Yeah,
And that's what we thought is the end of it. And I think a lot of the people who develop
yeah.
AI right now think they know stuff that really, no, that's not what we know.
Yeah, well, good doctors are comfortable with the unknown, right? So I think a lot of people that I've interacted with in my medical career, the best doctors have been those that are very comfortable with ambiguity, very
Mm.
comfortable with not knowing, and I think the humility of not understanding things fully is what I loved about studying medicine. So I don't think I would study anything else. If I could go back, I would still study medicine.
And still ophthalmology, specialize in.
I didn't want to be an ophthalmologist, actually. I wanted to be a pediatrician, but
Uh,
my dad influenced me because he was a surgeon and he said, well, do something that has some surgery in it. So he influenced my
uh,
decision, but I wanted to be a pediatrician, actually.
okay.
That's why I ended up doing pediatric ophthalmology. So
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, I'll tell you about my eye stories later. There's been some trauma there. Um, so okay, so now this is that was fascinating. Thank you for that. And now that the second question we always ask everybody is your first memory of ever encountering this idea, this value of academic integrity. I don't know who wants to go
I
first.
should go first. Maha should go first.
Okay, I have a safe story-ish to tell. It's not that safe. I mean, nobody's going to punish me for it. So the reason education is really important to me is that I grew up in Kuwait. I was born and raised in Kuwait in British schools that were like really British, where
Mm,
we weren't like allowed to speak Arabic. Very colonialist, but anyway, it was
mm,
good education, but very colonialist.
yes.
And then Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, and I couldn't go back home. So we were visiting family in Cairo at the time, so we stayed.
Ah,
And I went into a school. It was really difficult to get into schools because, like, all these Egyptians coming back. So I got into a school that wasn't really very good.
mm,
And even though it's in English and everything, but it was not the same quality. And I remember in an exam, one of the invigilators asked me to share my answer during the exam with the rest of the students.
no.
This does happen in some places here in Egypt up until now. And I remember feeling so weird and uncomfortable. I'd never seen this before. Nobody told me about academic integrity, but I just remember that feeling.
Hmm.
And as an adult now, what the problem is with this kind of normalizing this kind of behavior is that in college, I realized students who help other people cheat don't think that that's an academic integrity violation. They're helping their
Okay.
friends. And
They've been raised to
it's
be helpful.
understandable. It's
Yeah.
very cultural. It's
Mm-hmm.
so cultural. And if I had not encountered this myself, I would have thought it was crazy.
Mm,
So that's and so yeah, you're like, yeah, when I think about academic integrity, I think about all the ways students don't mean to be
mm-hmm.
harming, right, integrity of their learning experience, and they think they're actually doing something helpful or useful or good.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. So that's
I relate to that so much. And when I was doing my dissertation, I studied three different higher education institutions and how they were trying to create a culture of integrity. And one of them, I called it Lasallian College. It was a small Jesuit, liberal arts school. And one of the traditions, so they had the great books curriculum in the first year. And one of the traditions was when the newbies came, the first years came, the upperclassmen would share all their essays with them for their great books classes so that they didn't have to do their essays from scratch, right? This is before, AI and all of that. And so I called it cooperative. It was a cooperative. In their head, it wasn't cheating. It was welcoming. It was loyalty. It was being helpful. And that was a very institutionalized version of the same thing you're talking about. All right, Hoda.
Oh, I have loads of stories, but I'm not as brave as Bonnie. But I will share maybe a similar. I had a very similar experience to Maha when I
Hmm.
first came when I joined a high school here in Egypt, and I had a very similar experience where I was asked to share and all that. But when I went to university, I went to a large public university, so it's thousands of students, and I was very different. So I came from a different background. Very few students came from, let's say, international backgrounds, international education backgrounds. So I took really good notes during lectures, and I was a bit of a nerd. I was very studious, and I take a lot of notes, and people started noticing. So I would tutor students, I would share my notes, and on the day of an exam, I could see people had photocopied copies of the notes that I took during lecture, and I do mind maps and summaries and color coding and all this very elaborate note taking that I loved to do. And then in the exam, when they would ask me to help, and I would say no, it's like, they'd be calling out to me in the middle of the exam, question four, and I
Hmm.
was like, no. And there was almost like this dichotomy, like, you're willing to help me. Why can't you help me now?
Yeah,
Going back to this idea of
a lot.
uh, seeing it as help versus an academic integrity issue, an issue, this is where um, it's almost a competition in this large public university. It was extremely competitive, but it wasn't that I wasn't sharing because I was competitive, which is how they perceived it. It
Mm,
was I wasn't sharing because it was wrong. I saw it as like a morally wrong. And I wasn't familiar with any kind of, I mean, the first time I heard the word plagiarism was when I joined AUC. And this
okay.
is kind of something that I'll admit. That kind of terminology around academic integrity wasn't taught to us in public higher education here in Egypt, which is where I completed my entire all my certifications, all my qualifications were in public universities. It's not talked about, it's not taught, it's not explicit,
Hmm.
but it's expected to some degree. But it was completely different when I went to AUC. So when I thought about this question, or as I think about this question, I think my first exposure was when I came to AUC. And when I came to a liberal arts university, where I
Yeah.
started to reflect and say, oh, so that's what it is. Oh, there's a name for it. There's a framework for it. There's a system for it. And it was really almost an epiphany. It's like an existential crisis. This is what it is. And I've been doing it right the whole time, and people just didn't really understand what I was trying to do. But it was a very long journey. Like my
Yeah.
first year of college to when I was an adult. I was in
Yeah.
my I was in my mid-30s when I joined AUC, but it's a good 15-year chunk of my life where I didn't have a name for it,
Yeah.
right?
You
Um,
felt it but couldn't name it.
and I think that a lot of our students, and we discuss this, so I'm on the Academic Integrity Council at our institution, and we talk about how we label behaviors in students in a certain way. And I have these discussions with Maha and my team, and I'm sometimes I mean, many people do push back, but I push back extensively around how we name things, what kinds of terms we use, the punitive language around academic integrity. We're not in a court of law. We're in an institute of higher education. We're in a learning environment. And to separate between learning together, this cooperative peer
Mhm.
instruction, and the line between that and a breach in
Mm.
academic integrity. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about it, but that's kind of
Mm.
my first extended experience.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
I add something to this,
Yeah.
Hoda? I think also what happens is you have at AUC, you have a lot of American faculty, and
Mhm.
it's an American culture institution, but of course it's bicultural just by virtue of being in Egypt. And then you have faculty like Hoda who are naturally bicultural, or me who's been educated in a Western education setting all my life, and then people who just come from a very Egyptian background.
Mm.
And I think we always try to explain to students academic integrity from this Westernized perspective without accounting for their background or tying it to their own cultural background. So when I used to teach teachers, I used to actually talk to them about how Islamic scholarship is done. Because
Mm.
the way Islamic scholarship is, you cannot claim anything unless you say who said it and who told them that, and then who told them that, and how credible was each one of them.
Ah, yes.
And that is like, oh yeah, we do that. And then, oh, when you cite the Holy Quran, you have to cite it exactly as it is with the number of the line and the number of the
Mhm.
chapter. So that's like citation, and you can't just say it out of the blue. But if you're citing the Prophet, it's a paraphrase. So you don't have to cite it exactly, but you still have to say where it came from. And we already have this in our culture. It's just that you have to apply it everywhere now.
Yeah.
And, talking about how would you feel if someone took your thing and did this with it without crediting you, or without saying it was your idea, or even women and men in meetings where a woman says something and everybody ignores it, and then a man says it
5
and
minutes
everybody's
later.
like, well done.
That's
So
never
we talk about
happened
how
to
it
me, Maha.
feels. Believe it or not, there are some women who tell me that doesn't happen to me, and then a couple of weeks later, you know what, it does happen to me,
They
but I
Does
weren't
wasn't
happen.
noticing
they weren't noticing it. Yeah,
it.
I notice it every time. So no, I hear what you're saying because I we make when it comes to plagiarism, we make it so complicated for students. And I would say to students, like when you say, "Hey, have you seen this show on Netflix?" That's a citation. That's an attribution. We do it all the time naturally, but because I think in school we focus so much on APA format or MLA format that we made it not about the spirit of why we cite, but about the technicalities. And no one cares about that. I mean, there's nothing ethical about whether you italicize the journal title or the the article title, right? Like we focused on the wrong things for a long time.
Turnitin didn't help because
Yes.
we depended on a tool, and the tool made it about paraphrasing and not attribution.
Yeah.
And then the students thought, oh, well, if Turnitin doesn't catch it, then it's not unethical. And if Turnitin doesn't catch AI, and AI is not a person,
Yeah.
then we're fine. I
Yeah.
think a lot of students at the beginning were like, you told me not to copy someone else's ideas. It's not someone else's ideas. I'm good.
Right.
Yeah. And now you have AI, which is not a someone.
Yeah. Well, and I say, so I've been talking to students and I'll say, like, look, I think it's helpful to say I worked with it. I love the disclosure statements. I think it's helpful to say I worked with AI. This is the tool I used. This is how I used it. This is why I used it. This is how I found it helpful, not only for transparency, but for my metacognition, right? My thinking about my thinking. But for years, I advised faculty who said you can work with others on this thing, but what you submit should be your own work in your own words, right? Which makes no sense whatsoever. And I said, okay, if you're going to say that, then have them give attribution to the people that helped them. Have them say, hey, my roommate like read over my essay and gave me this idea, or my mom reminded me, blah, 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 just to teach people again that metacognition about where are my ideas coming from. And we didn't do that. I couldn't convince too many faculty to do that. And so now they're wanting students to do that for AI. And the students are saying, well, I never had to do that when I worked with humans before. Why do I have to do that now? I wonder what you think about that. And what's the conversation going on at AUC around just attribution in general and this idea of it's part of keeping track of our thinking and our research and the formation of our thoughts.
Mm.
Are you having that
Yeah,
conversation
I
there?
mean the scholarly conversation, right? So Hoda, I'm going to let you talk from the broader perspective. I'll just share like my perspective within my own course.
Mm,
So first of all, the transparency thing has been my stance from the very beginning because I understood that we couldn't really stop students from using AI.
yeah.
And even if I don't think it's appropriate for everything, I need them to develop that consciousness of
Mhm.
that literacy of understanding why it's not appropriate in certain contexts and the limitations and the biases and all the ethical considerations. So I
Yeah.
always said you can use AI, but just be transparent about how you use it and show me the link to the conversation you had with it. And it takes a while for students to figure out
Yeah.
how to do that because nobody else was asking them to do that. But more and more faculty are asking us for attribution statement
Good.
samples. And now our graduate programs have an attribution sample that's similar to a journal that I really like that gives you all these different options.
Hmm.
But the issue I have is honestly that AI itself is a thief of ideas and doesn't really attribute where it got it from. And now that it's starting to attribute where it got it from, sometimes it tells you something that isn't in that article that it's telling you is in the article. So it's especially like these deep research ones that write you like a 10,000 word paper.
Hmm.
If you're asking it for something that has not happened, that is not true, it will find a way to tell you that what you want is there. But you read those articles and it doesn't actually say that in there. So I keep talking to students about if it's not a brainstorming type of use of AI, if there's some kind of precision there,
Mm.
you and the guidelines that we co-developed with faculty and students, Hoda and I, we co-developed these guidelines with faculty and students was always like you got to go verify it with something credible because AI is not credible, right? Hoda, what would you like to add to that? You're muted though.
I've been thinking about while you were talking, Maha, about the how we work at CLT, and even before people started talking about co-creation, we were co-creating things.
Mm.
So co-creation now is a buzzword and everybody uses it. We're going to co-create, we're going to co-design, but we authentically, we really have been doing it for many, many years now. And with co-creation, it's a product of many, many, many minds. And when you come up with an idea, or you come up with a report, or you come up and you list the people who have contributed to the report, right? The same kind of approach, I think students introducing this idea of knowledge being co-created, whether it's, human, hybrid,
Mm.
augmented, whatever you're using, library resources, using AI, this, I would say, mindset, this co-creation mindset, I think is really important. And to, let's say, remove the shame, I'm borrowing the word from Maha, the AI shaming, but to remove the shame around admitting, all right, and I love how you've connected the transparency and the disclosure statements with the metacognitive kind of thinking through. But when you disclose, you're unpacking your thinking and you're making your thinking visible. And that should be a good thing,
Yes.
right? That should be something that students should be rewarded for and maybe graded for, right? If you're going to, if I were to assign a grade, I would say, show me how you think about these things.
Mhm.
And I think that unpacking the co-creation is really important. Another thing is I was working with Perplexity to dig up some resources around something. And I realized that in some cases, a lot of students are maybe looking at how they use AI in a way that is very superficial, and that they're not as savvy as maybe someone with our research background, with our years of education, years of critical thinking. And so it's very difficult for us when we use the tool. And Matt and I are planning for a session, our symposium in a couple of weeks, how faculty are using, for them to think about how they use AI best, and then to maybe be able to transfer that to how they deal with students around transparency and authenticity and originality of work. We also have a statement in our AI statement, our AUC statement on AI around originality of work. And when I was using the word originality, the definition of originality has really changed dramatically. A lot of the definitions are no longer valid. And I was having a conversation with our team a couple of weeks ago. Even the way Turnitin works now may no longer be valid. And I hope nobody
Mm.
gets angry. Our
Our youngest
youngest
staff
staff
member
member,
says it's
our most junior
irrelevant.
staff, it's irrelevant.
Mm.
It's not working the same way it was working. It's not delivering on the same value that it was proposed and designed to deliver on. Why are we using it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true that so I have disagreed with a lot of the hype saying we have to rethink what cheating is and what academic integrity is. I disagree with that. I I do think that academic integrity is what you both identified earlier. It was that gut feeling of like this isn't right, this isn't fair, this isn't what I ought to do. And cheating is if you're dishonest about your knowledge and abilities, then it's cheating. I don't see why we have to redefine that. But I do think we need to redefine, yes, what originality means, and that has always been a quite a Western notion of individualistic originality. And we know the history the history of so many men taking credit right for their wives actually doing the writing because women couldn't be authors or what have you. So we know that that has needed rethinking in a long time anyways, but also this just idea of rethinking what we value and what we have to what our graduates have to leave us with. So, Hoda, you kind of hinted at like focusing on process over product, right? When you asked them to disclose their thinking and what was going on there, and maybe even grading that rather than just grading the final paper. So I love all that. I love all of that. Is that all in stuff that you mentioned policies or guidelines that you two helped faculty and students develop? Is that all in those guidelines? Are you talking about some of these things at AUC
A
in a
lot of it
formal
is in
way?
the guidelines, and then a lot of it comes up in conversation. And we have guidelines, and then we have guidelines for syllabus, and then we have guidelines for reporting inappropriate use that are
Okay.
very, very hopefully socially constructivist and more about conversation than
Yeah.
punishment.
Yeah.
Um, we're struggling with trying to convince people not to use AI detectors, trying to explain to them that these are not very accurate and that they're more likely to flag a non-native speaker's writing as AI, even if it isn't. It flags our own pure human writing. Hoda's and mine and Hoda's even a native speaker, and it still flags her writing as AI sometimes. So yeah, those are all parts of the conversation. The thing that I think Huda meant to say but didn't come out very clearly is that conversation about how faculty use AI, that's a co-design session with students.
Oh,
Because we want students to tell faculty how they feel
yeah.
about faculty using AI. Because I've been hearing students talking about, "Well, I can't believe the professor did this with AI."
Yeah.
And yeah, and conversations going back and forth. The one that I'm always, and I'm really, I try to be as balanced as possible with not shaming people with AI.
Mhm.
But when faculty in a liberal arts institution with like 20 or 30 students ask about using feedback, AI for feedback, I say,
Yeah.
please don't. You
Yeah.
have 20 students. People, if you're teaching a MOOC with like millions of people, then that's understandable. If you have 20 students, a lot of them are either paying a lot of money or on a very hefty
Mhm.
scholarship to be here.
Yeah.
They can use AI themselves. And I know students who use AI to help them improve the assignment by giving it the rubric. Those are very smart students. That's a very smart use of AI. It's your material
Yeah.
that you put into AI and you ask it for feedback. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's the student doing it for themselves, but the faculty members, like you're supposed to have something to say that's different from AI. And AI is so Western trained that it really
Yeah.
doesn't represent us. It doesn't understand us. It stereotypes the Arab and the Muslim and the Egyptian experience in so many ways that
Yeah. Okay, so you just opened up a big can of worms there, right? And I'm thinking we need to do part two of this conversation. So I'll schedule you both for a part two if you don't mind. But I do want to touch on one thing you said now because it's related to a recent release. So we've already been talking about tech companies. So a certain company named Grammarly has released, this AI grader. So now students can hand their paper, or they just have Grammarly write their paper for them. That could be happening too. The rubric, and then Grammarly searches for information about Maha Bali on the internet to determine who she is, and then they say this is likely how the professor will grade your paper. So you said I don't mind if students are using it to get feedback on their paper. The hairs on me stand up a little bit when I think about that process because it focuses students on the grades, that extrinsic motivation, and it focuses on the product, and it focuses on how Grammarly thinks we should write, which is very Western and very what's that? What's the word for standardized English, right? I I don't like
Yeah,
it.
it's
What do you say?
forcing them to be more average. It's like
It's yeah,
promoting
everybody.
mediocrity and
Yeah.
blandness. Yeah, which I should hope when
Uniformity.
students do this, I'll give them the worst grade, I think. But I should hope that I was talking about feedback, not grading, by the way. I said rubric, I know, but I was talking
Yes.
about feedback.
Okay.
And I get my students. So the thing with giving students a little bit of agency is that I realized a lot of them use it to correct their grammar,
Yeah.
not to change their ideas.
Yeah.
And
But
I
they can
tell them
correct
now
for
that
the
I love
grammar
seeing
is.
spelling mistakes. I love seeing
Yeah.
grammar mistakes. I like seeing Egyptian English. And
Yeah.
Hoda and I in the beginning were playfully asking it to write like a non-native speaker because the students are not very smart and they produce this like perfect native speaker
Perfect,
English and we know
polished.
it wasn't them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So, but what
I
if they come
miss
up to you
their
after?
voice when they use
Yeah.
this. It deletes
Oh,
yeah, it
totally.
overtakes their voice and I hate that. I don't like reading. It's nauseating for
It
me.
is. It's very invasive. So have you haven't yet then had a student say to you, but this is the grade Grammarly said I was going to get. Why'd you give me a different grade?
I've never had
You
that
haven't
because I
had
do
that yet? See.
ungrading. I do ungrading
Oh, okay.
and
So
very
But
low
I,
stakes most of my
I have
assessments.
heard a faculty member tell me that a student debated a grade on a paper that they said ChatGPT told me that this was a level work.
ah,
So I did hear, I mean, I've heard a
okay.
story from a faculty member. I'm not surprised that that students would seek out, validation, confirmation. Sometimes they're unsure, or sometimes we don't give them enough feedback. And
Yeah.
this is also kind of um, laying bare some of we have to also reflect on our own practice. If a student wants feedback and we're not available to give them the feedback that
Yeah.
they feel they need to improve their work and to achieve the quote unquote grade that they feel that they can achieve, it's a lot of labor, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, your time with students. I mean, we work with a lot of our writing faculty and they do conferencing with their students. They spend hours with students giving feedback on multiple drafts and all of
Hmm.
that. And this is what would nauseate me is that if that were lost and replaced with
Just
students
automated.
seeking, yeah, it's like students seeking therapy on AI. It nauseates me, it horrifies me.
Mhm.
Um, Not being able to reach out to a human for support when you're struggling. This also just gives me the creepy crawlies. I mean, I can't imagine a student thinking that they were so, and it reminds me of Peter Felton's work, The Connections Are Everything, his book, Connections Are Everything. And this, the power and the strength in relationship rich, these relationships between students and peers and academic staff and faculty. Um, this is where really this idea of using a technology to provide feedback on work um,
Mhm.
really does horrify me, honestly speaking. But again, there may be some potential with, very
Mhm.
large classes, maybe in some settings where maybe I don't know. I can't
But
imagine a
there
world.
But like
Yeah.
back to what you're saying, are there human ways of offering that support? I think one of the things in our approach to sort of compassionate learning design that I worked on, Nicola Pallet and Daniela Gashaga from South Africa on, we're saying, what are we not offering to students that's making them go to AI? Are we not offering enough teaching assistant
Mm.
office
Yep.
hours? Are we asking them to do assignments or assessments that they're not all equally capable of doing? Are we not giving them enough time? And so they go to AI because they can't imagine. Are we not offering extensions if they have certain circumstances? Like, and are we offering them something that doesn't seem relevant enough to them that they want to actually do the work?
Hmm.
And when I give students a lot of freedom of, there's a particular assignment in my class about games and game design, and they have to create scenarios. And I say, you can use AI anywhere in the process, but you have to reflect on why you did or didn't use it. And the idea is to experiment with it. And a lot of students end up not using it a lot because they say it stereotypes my experiences, it's flattened my experiences. The closer the game they choose is to their heart.
Yeah.
So blind students talking about the experience of being blind at
Hmm.
AUC, they never like what AI comes up with,
Yeah.
even though they use AI a lot as visually impaired
Sure.
students because they need it for other things, right? But not to tell their story,
Yeah.
right?
I love that. So now we've weaved in here and implicitly talked about several things we talk about in the book, right? Making assessments and activities more meaningful and authentic to students' experience. Not that that's the silver bullet to stopping them from cheating, but it does increase their desire to learn and to actually do it rather than to offload it. We talked about you briefly mentioned ungrading when we've done several episodes about alternative grading as a way to, again, decrease the focus on extrinsic motivation and to focus students on the process. We talked about process over product. And I love that AAUC has developed guidelines for, by students and faculty. And I love that you're getting students to tell faculty things, because I think that's very brave of them. And like you said, there's a lot of shame around this, and a lot of students don't really want to be transparent about what they think about this and how they're using it and what they think faculty should be doing. So I definitely do want to say, we're going to have to close it out, but I definitely do want to say we need to do at least part 2. There might be part 3. I don't know. We'll see. We're at the beginning of the academic year, maybe a couple more episodes. But for now, I just want to thank you both for coming on the opposite of cheating, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Tricia.
Thank you so much, Tricia.